Hello to everyone, and thank you, Kyoko, for asking me to chair today. Hopefully the tech will work. That's always the worry with these things. So we're going to start with an intro from Tina, and I think Alan is going to say a few words. Yes. Then we'll have some words from our editors, and then we've got a panel discussion from some of the reviewers, and then some readings. So lots of exciting things to find out about this fantastic book. I shall just hold it up just so that everyone can see it. Okay, I'll pass you over to Tina now. Thank you, Tina.
Great, thanks, Catherine. I'd just like to really welcome everyone. So I'm Tina Cartwright. I'm director of the Westminster Centre for Psychological Sciences here at Westminster. I'm very sorry I can't be there in person today, but I'm really delighted to welcome you all here, whether you're in person or online, to this fabulous book launch of Activity Theory. I'm sure most of you already know Kyoko, who's organised today's event and obviously is one of the book's editors. And she joined us in psychology last September and has already become a very valued member of our research centre and our psychology unit. So it's a real pleasure to host this event. Our research centre encompasses very diverse research from across psychology, from health to neuroscience to self and society, but it has a strong focus on interdisciplinary and inclusive research, which has an impact in the real world. And I think this book, Activity Theory, is very much aligned with this focus. So this afternoon, Kyoko and co-editors, Alex and Miriam, and their guest reviewers are going to share some of their reflections of the contributions of the book and Activity Theory in terms of theoretical advancements and also in terms of wider practice in terms of addressing key societal challenges. So we're really excited to hear everyone's reflections, and I hope you all really enjoy the event and the opportunity to meet and network, even if you're online. So thank you for coming and enjoy the event. And I'll pass over to Alan, the head of school.
Okay, so where do I need to be?
The microphone is here. Yeah, you're welcome to sit down.
Yep, good afternoon and welcome to the School of Social Sciences. It's a great pleasure to have those in the room joining us and those from around the world. My background is in psychology, and my particular love is the history and philosophy of psychology. So it's great to have Kyoko in the unit of psychology. It gives me someone interesting to talk to and to develop ideas. I think what's interesting is that our School of Social Sciences, which comprises criminology, politics, international relations, and sociology, is that a School of Social Sciences, and we situate psychology within the social sciences, which I think is relatively unusual in the UK. So this book, its focus on activity theory, I think is very much a theory and approach which is about social theory and the social sciences. So it's a great pleasure for us to think about and to explore some of the issues related by activity theory, and then in the future think about how we can use this to think about certainly what we do at the University of Westminster in our school, and to forge some links with our listeners and our fellow colleagues who are interested in developing psychology as a genuine social science. So thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, I'm going to sit over here just so that I can click on anything that needs to be clicked on. But we are now going to hear from the editors. Kyoko. Alex, start with Alex. Start with Alex. Okay. Alex, can you just check that we can hear you?
Sure. Are you able to hear me okay?
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Wonderful. It's so nice to be with all of you, even just virtually. I can see Kyoko and Miriam there. Very good. Okay, excellent. So first of all, I really want to give a heartfelt thank you to Kyoko for organizing this, and to both Kyoko and Miriam for really making this project happen. It was very much a collective endeavor. It took a lot of work over a long period of time. And so, yeah, I want to begin with that. And also to thank those who did the heavy lifting, the folks who did most of the writing, the contributors. And it's such a treat to have some of them here today. I still, even after all of these many years, feel very much like an outsider looking at this body of thought, in part because I still carry with me that very initial awe that I had when I came to activity theory and learned about its existence and realized that this is something really quite special. It felt like a hidden gem that was uncovered, and I really wanted to take some time to figure this out and to share with others this discovery, especially those who weren't within the field itself. And that was really the motivation behind this project, to try to put together an introductory text that would be a window into both the history of this field and also into the remarkable people who are practicing these ideas and developing these ideas across the world today. And we have some of them here. There's a lot more I have to say about this. I found this absolutely fascinating, even still after all of these years. But I won't, because we have so many other people here who can say it so much better. So I'll end here, and I'll turn it over to my co-editors, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much to everyone for coming.
Thank you. You want to?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, here and online. I'm delighted to be here as well, at the end of a long journey. I work in the west of Ireland. I'm a lecturer in Atlantic Technological University. And how I came to activity theory is quite a circuitous route. My background is actually in IT. So I worked in the IT industry and then moved into academia. And ATU is a multi-campus environment. So I had the opportunity to work in a couple of different campuses. And I noticed, although we were the one university, people thought very differently about the same thing on the different campuses. So I was curious about that. And because I had an IT background, I was interested in how lecturers were slow to uptake relatively easy to use teaching technologies. So I was curious about that and I wanted to study it. So I didn't know how to go about doing that. Somebody mentioned to me that Harry Daniels was in the UK and he might be a man to talk to. So I went to the University of Bath and I did a PhD there part-time while still lecturing full-time in Ireland under Kyoko and Harry Daniels. And that was my introduction to activity theory. And I did a practical application of it based on Uri Engestrom's developmental work research, where I intervened in the lecturer's practice to understand why the slow and low uptake with technology. And I had, I think I can say, a successful outcome in terms of understanding and moving the lecturer's thinking forward a little bit. So a transformative experience in many ways. So then Kyoko introduced me to Alex, and the three of us embarked on this project, and here we are today. So that's my...
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Yeah. Thank you for coming today. I'm very delighted to share some of the passions I have in my academic journey. One of which is activity theory. I came across this theory through my supervisor, Dave Middleton. Some of you might know. He might be online. I told him to join, but he's retired and he has better things to do. But
he was the one who actually gave me a lot of ideas about how the social cultural theory tradition branched out in different directions. So from that onwards, it's an exciting journey of encounters, because I really appreciated the serendipity of how many people crossed my path and then gave me interesting challenges intellectually and otherwise. I would name few people because I can't, I have long list, but after Loughborough with Dave Middleton, I joined University of Bath Center for Sociocultural Activity Theory. And Harry Daniels is the one who really set the fire to all of us, including Miriam, to actually study human activity from a much more broader scope. And many people crossed their paths. Jan Valsner and Marianne Hedegaard, Seth Chaklin, those are from Denmark. And for funny fate took me to Denmark. I worked at the Copenhagen University. And there are loads of people who are passionate about this social cultural theory tradition. And the group is called PPUCO, Person, Practice, Udvikling, meaning education and culture. So through that group, there are many meetings of various readings and seminars. And I met Alex in one of the post-phenomenology seminar hosted by Katrina Hasse. She's one of the authors of this book. So that was a long time ago, but we somehow kept in touch. And then we decided to work together to bring this fantastic baby in the womb out in the world. And I'm very honored to have worked with you, with Miriam. Okay, I have many other things to say. People who have helped me through this process, publisher, Ibden Press, and also a special mention should be made to Dr. Mary Chambers, who is the editor. She did a miraculous job of indexing and all the proofreading and final aspects of fine-tuning the book. The book didn't come out error-free without her help. And I really want, Mary is here today from Reading. And also she's a freelance editor. So if you are interested in hiring her, because I use her for all my PhD students' PhD dissertation, proofreading and so forth. So I'm very delighted to be able to contribute to the contributors. Amina and technicians, Munir, Leon, Jorge, everybody in the University of Westminster. I learned a lot that many things happen with these people's invisible, workers who set up everything and tested everything. So I am very happy and I'm in a good place. Thank you very much. Yeah. In a good timing, Peter, our Vice Chancellor in here. Yes, thank you for coming. Yes. So we finished our part.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are slightly ahead of schedule, which is fantastic, which means a little bit more time. So what we're going to do now, thank you so much for that. It's been lovely to hear from you all, and it sounds like it was a really exciting kind of amalgamation and of thinking, which is fantastic. And I'm so very much looking forward now to hearing some of the readings. So we're going to try and manage the next bit as a kind of panel discussion, but we want to sort of hear individually from people, but then also have a bit of interaction. I don't know how this is going to work online, but we'll give it a go. But I think we have got, Kirill has actually got a presentation to start us off. So we'll start with Kirill's presentation, and then we'll come to each of the other reviewers. And then we'll come to each of the reviewers and get a comment from each of them, and then hopefully have a bit of a discussion. So Kirill, when you've finished, if you would want to take a seat.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm slightly misunderstood the brief, but I think it's so helpful because. Oh, sure. There were many parts that I could have drawn on. I just want to point to how 3 chapters relate to my own work. My field is human-computer interaction. And first, just to talk a little bit about the work I did. Yeah. So my PhD thesis was on how teenagers use apps to collect data about themselves. So teenagers sometimes track their mood, they track how many steps they've walked, etc. I was kind of finding out why and how they could do this. Was there something that was in any way helpful for them? Do they learn anything from it? When these apps are designed, these self-tracking apps, there's often an assumption that the puzzle to be solved is how do we get the insight from the data to the head of the user? And it's this dyad between the app and the user that designers are focusing on. And you end up with them trying to automate insights that exist, track everything in one place, understand your behavior. So it will give you the understanding. It will say your weight is higher after you wake or during sleep. You're more productive when it's Tuesday. This is the attempts to get the insight from the data into your head. Now, these things are not very meaningful. These insights are not very insightful. And I really like the phrase from Alex Levin's chapter that this is freeze frame thinking. It's assuming that if we kind of take a snapshot of data, that within the data, there's some kind of magical force where it's going to reveal its own meaning to us. What it misses is when you have something like this iconic image that does have an effect on us, this is why it has an effect. It plays a certain role to do with customs we have around masculinity, ideas to do with history, and all of that needs to be sort of excavated so that the image and all of its ideality and all of the potential meanings that it's got can be unpacked. We don't have time now to go through, but I did share a bit of a script. But what I did in my PhD was got some teenagers to design a self-tracking app and then to discuss this data with each other. And what would happen is across the discussion, it would take on meanings through the role that it played in the conversation. I think, yeah, the kind of imagery that Alex uses in this chapter about the meaning that's kind of crystallized in an image, and you can almost like run the film backwards and forwards, really applies to data as well. So when you just ask the user, in this case, it's a year 8 boy, did you learn something from the app? They'll say, well, no, some days I don't have good sleep, some days I do have good sleep. And then as the conversation evolves, what happens? And then suddenly you get the point where he says, so Tuesday I put it as dark blue because, yeah, I was really tired on that day. Like, yeah, I was literally falling asleep. Yeah, and I don't even know, just go on YouTube usually. Janelle says, yeah, same. That's interesting. How many of you stay up late because of YouTube? Yeah, because you get sucked in. So you watch something and you have certain channels that you follow, and then you just watch them. What happened is for the rest of the conversation, then that dark blue tile now had a meaning, and that was to do with staying up late on YouTube on their phone. That's something that was that was brought about. At the moment, what I'm focusing on is a totally different project, but still dealing with personal data. I'm thinking about energy microgrids. So a situation, let's say a council estate has solar panels installed on the roof, and that energy is then shared among everyone living in that block. I'm interested in how can residents understand what it means to share energy, because energy is just very intangible thing. How do you make it more tangible? How do you give them some real agency over it? Now, one way to do it is a kind of freeze frame thinking. So I got this is someone's graph of their electricity usage with half-an-hour averages, and I got them to annotate what activity they were doing at that time. Lots of approaches say, okay, what you then want to do is to get an AI to recommend to them when they should do their laundry, when they should put the oven on, etc. And I'll be arguing that actually that misses a lot of the contextual information, which is actually saying here. You can't just get it off the graph straight away like this. And there's 2 dominant approaches within my field. One is kind of more towards game theory, where it's about you create a mathematical model, and then there's a separate and totally different tradition, which is a socio-technical tradition that criticizes this and instead proposes that we should look at it as people acting rationally, that there's all of these human machine assemblages. I thought it was interesting that this framing kind of came through after I read this chapter by Bonnie Nardi, where she describes these two approaches in a slightly different context, where you've got a scientific and an apparently anti-scientific view, both sharing something, which is that they want to reduce everything to a single kind of master concept, whether that's the mathematics of game theory or whether in case of new materialism, something like this, approaching this all. There's no structural difference between large and small actors, between a major institution or a single individual, or even a thing as mundane as a door opener. So everything is flattened to the same level as it is within game theory. So these apparently different approaches are both doing a reduction of what is human, and what activity theory helps me to do is to actually preserve what's human. As Nardi says, if we're all just smart matter, desirous of self-expression, living in freedom, why should we punch back against any political project that we are involved in? So it's with Nardi's lens that I then come back to this socio-technical approach, where papers in my field say things like, we should recognize the needs and agency of the pool pump. The subsidiary role that is being attributed to artifacts does not sit comfortably with the realities of ubiquitous computing, the developments of machine learning. It's obvious that computational artifacts equipped with sensors, processing equipment, and programs, actuators, can be viewed as outside of the direct presence and awareness of people. We should respect. I'll finish in a second. No? Oh, that's a shame. Sorry. Right. It's probably, yeah, it's fine. I can click on share slides, but I think I'll take that too much time if I do. We should respect human collaboration and co-performances with the thermostat. So this is the kind of discourse that we have within new materialist socio-technical approaches. I'm with Nardi that we should not respect the thermostat, that we should respect the people using the thermostat, because the thermostat is not motivated by any motives. What all of this does is, again, return us to kind of freeze frame thinking, because it's all about immediacy. What this misses is that we, as people, as Jacqueline stresses, form a path through history, through our cultural production, which we then occupy, kind of walk through. So without this longer historical and cultural account of practices, if it's always about the assemblage of things, then it's not, it's a very thin definition of agency, because we miss any sense of development. What it misses is the fact that actually, if we have something just like a system designed where prices nudge you about when you turn your laundry on or you don't turn your laundry on, it's constantly in the now. It's constantly saying, oh, it's cheap, I'll do it. It's not thinking about, okay, but what are the actual radical changes that need to be made to the way that we use laundry? What's the practice behind that? And what reasons do people have? What personal motives do they have to do that? It keeps everything at this kind of external level, and activity theory, as Chapin says, helps us to get onto the inside. So, I'll just finish by saying, the goal in the research which I'm conducting is to use an activity theory approach to first start with the practices. So the practices aren't identical, of course, with jobs. Just think about the practices of households from a lower socioeconomic background. Are they a delivery driver? Are they a nurse with a night shift? Are they mother of five? All of these things are going to be implicated in the visualization for them in what's meaningful and the available options that they've got open to them. And then I need to think about actual activities. So are they trying to wash 5 sets of clothes, including one for a baby? Are they trying to be helpful to their neighbors? Are they trying to turn on the heater when they need to? And I'm interested in what role can AI play here? The role that AI should play is as a tool that supports motives, and neither of the other dominant approaches that I spoke about before, socio-technical or game theoretic, has any reason against AI replacing all parts of what humans are currently doing this arrangement. And as I think Jakelin's very helpful basic assumptions will help me to go through and to kind of outline what we do need to preserve from the AI. Right, thanks. Yeah.
Really fascinating perspective. So can I just check that we have here the rest of our reviewers? Alan, do you want to come up with you as well? Yes.
Sorry, can I just sort of interject? It's quite hard for us to hear online, so the speaker needs to speak into the microphone, and also if there's slides, we're not seeing them, so maybe they need to share the screen. So just thought I'd let you know.
Thanks, Tina. Can you hear me okay now? Tina?
No, we can't hear. I think unless the microphone, you're right by the microphone.
Can you hear now?
No.
Don't worry. Has something gone on?
We could hear when the speaker was in front of the microphone.
No, but I'm literally we're right next to it now. Look. Anyone want to have a look at this? Anyone think they might be able to work out what's going on?
It's fine when you're there, but not when you move away.
But when I'm here,
yeah,
it's using the wrong microphone then. Hang on. This one. Try that now. Is that better?
That's brilliant.
Okay, brilliant. I think we were on the wrong microphone. Okay.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Tina. That's really helpful. Can I check that we have our other three speakers? Rita? Rita there? Yes, fantastic. Isabel? Anyone? Can you shout out if you can hear us, Isabel?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yeah. And Jakob? Jake. Yeah. Sorry, Jake.
Yes, here I am. Just found the mic button.
Thank you. Okay, that's really fantastic. Okay, we shall make this work now. So we've heard a little bit about how this work relates to a very specific field, which has been very insightful and really, really interesting to hear. I guess what would be helpful would be to start by, I'd like to hear from each of the others what their sort of immediate impression is, just something that you'd like to kind of pull from the book, or whether it's a question that comes to mind, or some one or two things that have really jumped out at you from the book. So maybe we can start with that. I did wonder whether, for the benefits of the people in this room and maybe some online, whether anyone would feel willing to give us a kind of very brief definition of what activity theory is, because I think it would be really nice to just make sure the discussion we're having sits within that context. So not everybody obviously has read the book. So is there anyone from this panel who's willing to give that definition? If not, we might ask Kyoko to do that. Just to give us a bit of a sense of what we've heard now, some detail, and I think from that we've been able to surmise some of what activity theory is about. But I think it'd be useful to just frame the rest of the discussion before we go to these other speakers, just to kind of have a sense of what it is. I know that the book is a long answer to that question.
Yes, it is, and
but can you tell us kind of what the general principles of activity theory are?
Just to follow Kirill was saying, that the activity theory looks at the human practices, whatever we do, teaching, learning, discussing, and doing whatever we do. We look at the practices from the lens of mind is not reduced into an individual, brain phenomenon.
Yes.
And we use language, we use technology, we use various material objects and symbolic objects like language to achieve things, to get the job done in the name of practice. And we look at the use of that in Kyril's case, the digital technology. Yeah. And Miriam and I wrote together with about the lecturers' reluctance to use Moodle.
Yeah,
really. Why these lecturers who are moved on to this technological teaching are not using Moodle.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science to use Moodle, but they seem to have resisted. So we try to understand how this technologization actually impacted our practice.
Yes,
and their motivation or their motive have changed over time.
And the point is to take that holistic view where you're taking into account the context and the culture as well as the individual and the technology. Is that
the use of it in that given context?
Yeah.
I think just to add to what Kyoko says, activity theory gives us a framework by which we can study human activity. We can study humans in their natural environment, lecturers in a university, doctors in a hospital, or whatever.
Yes.
Activity theory gives us a framework to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's really, really helpful. What I might do then is move over to our online speakers and just ask initially, we'll kind of try and turn this into a bit more of a conversation, because already I feel like I've got questions based on the things that you said, but can I maybe start by just asking you to either ask a question or comment on something that you have picked up in the book that you think you've kind of learned from, or that has particular relevance to your the work that you do. So maybe shall we start with Rita, Dr. Rita Charlotte Duggan from the University of Bath?
Well, there are several chapters and ideas that I thought were really brilliant. I particularly enjoyed Sanino's article because I'm quite interested in agency.
So could you tell us a little bit about that and about what it is that appealed to you about that chapter?
Well, as I understood it, Sanino critiques some ideas or perspectives on agency, and then looks at a more activity or dialectical view of how we might look at agency from a cultural historical perspective. I thought she was really brave taking on Margaret Archer's view of agency, but I found a sensitivity in her writing that takes away from what I see as quite brutal in the realist perspective, and I think that's a way of moving us forward. I put in my notes, it gives possibilities for hope. Sort of the existing theories of agencies or perspectives are either reproductive, if you like, or reduce the possibilities, and I think that's the biggest take I took from that chapter. But actually, and also it allows us to see agency when we at first may not be able to see it, and in a sense that links to Alex's wonderful introductory, because I love the idea of thinking in film. You put a whole new perspective on it, and in moments, and they're constantly changing. So there were things that resonated between the chapters as well. So yeah, Sanino's really stood out for me. And as I wrote in my notes, the dialectical view of agency gives hope to human suffering. What else? I liked Catherine, House's, because it put over a new possibility in terms of, she was looking at global issues and problems and saying, well, okay, we've got this post-humanist perspective that's very, it's very popular at the moment, but we've also got an activity theory, and if we put them together, could we start to give some further explanations to some of the global issues that we're looking at, like climate change, for example, she uses. So, and there are so many things. So I like in Levant's chapter, I love the section on Ilyontov and consciousness in slow motion, and how that was revealed through some of the studies.
Lovely.
And then I felt myself starting to think about Backhurst's idea of where he was talking about the ideal and the realm of thought, and the idea that the source of the ideal lies in human activity. So there were chapters that really just made me stop and reflect, and there were other chapters that made me think, yes, this takes us forward. So we start thinking in a different way, thinking about the problems in society.
Thank you so much, Rita. And can you just tell us what your background is? Because it's very interesting. I love the sort of interdisciplinary perspective here. So what is your sort of field of study?
Well, I'm in the Department of Education.
Okay.
I'm interested in development. And I started off being influenced by Harry Daniels. So I was quite interested in development work research because I'd been an ethnographer, educational ethnographer and a teacher, but educational ethnography just helped me to understand. It didn't take me any further. I wanted the research and development. So when I watched development work research at work, I could see theory, problem and method all working together in motion. And I found that quite fascinating. And then I moved on to, and then I was quite influenced by Hedegaard and Fleer, because I'm very interested in children's learning and development and also cross-national work. So
lovely, thank you. So it's quite interesting that we've already had two people who were out in the field and have kind of gone looking for a way of trying to make sense of a problem, basically, and it seems to have attracted that, and actually even yours is very sort of practical, isn't it? So okay, thank you very much, Rita. We'll come back to you probably, but can we maybe hear from Isabel? So Isabel is from Queen Mary University. Isabel, can you just tell us what your sort of field of study discipline is, and then maybe your take on anything that sort of jumped out at you from the book that you want to comment on?
Sure. So I'm in the Department of Comparative Literature, but I look at philosophy. So I look at various encounters between Russian and French philosophy, and particularly also late Soviet philosophy. So I'm interested in late Soviet Marxism. And I think my encounter with the activity approach is really mediated by Evald Ilyenkov and Soviet Marxist activity theory, which is also quite prominently covered in the book. I mean, we have the introductory chapter by Alex Levant, and then also the interview with David Backhurst, which I think is really also important to understand the kind of Soviet background of activity concepts, and also Vassoitinen's chapter. And there were actually two things I wanted to bring to our discussion today, which I thought, for me personally, but maybe also broader, I thought were really important. The first one is also what Kirill already brought up, is this idea of a kind of finding like thicker descriptions of agency also in current debates around ecology, AI, and I'm really interested in this kind of precarious space of non-human agency in this whole activity framework, and I will speak a little bit more about it. But the second idea which interests me is how activity theory, which when I read the book, I was really impressed how kind of interdisciplinary, but also alive it is as a tradition. And I was thinking it's a really interesting way to also bring debates from Soviet dialectical materialism back into the spotlight for contemporary philosophical debates, which is a kind of almost dead tradition. But I think through this idea of activity, certain ideas can also maybe be updated, radicalized, and maybe also criticized. And what I'm speaking particularly about is what I think is a kind of tension or blind spot in Soviet activity theory, in particular Ilyenkov, where there's a clash between an anthropocentric claim of human uniqueness and then or human special kind of activity and all sorts of unconscious radical imaginaries of non-human agency. And Ilyenkov, for example, kind of wraps this in kind of sci-fi genres or tries to kind of speak about non-human agency and non-human intelligence through the lens of sci-fi, where they're like octopuses who think and mushrooms who act, and they maybe don't have eyes or nose, but they kind of still have an ability to think. And I'm quite interested in these imaginaries of non-human agency and activity. And particularly interesting was for me the chapter by Katrin Hasse in this regard, where she speaks about also the necessity to kind of shift towards what do tools do. And Kirill already criticized a little bit this shift away from actually tools also serving kind of humans. But I'm quite interested to bring or link this back to also Soviet dialectical materialism and this idea that there's a material agency, including objects, as also Andy Blunden wrote quite interestingly in his chapter, but that this material agency is also another form of activity, which is maybe not necessarily human or anthropocentric. And the very idea of thinking matter or the thinking body, what David Bacchus also covered in his really interesting and beautiful interview. And there are all these kind of pieces, I think, which are quite interesting when it comes to contemporary debates about the Anthropocene, ecology, and maybe a more kind of interconnected, less anthropocentric view on agency and relationality. And I think these were the little bits, there's a lot more I could speak about, but these were I think the main interests that I discovered by reading this rich book.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That's really helpful and really, really interesting to hear. Such again, a very, very different perspective, which is really, really interesting. I want to come back to that in a second, but let's move to Jake now and see what Jake would like to sort of start off by saying. Jake, are you there?
Yep, here I am. First of all, thank you for the invite. It's wonderful to be part of this crowd and be able to kind of listen in on the discussion and take also part, and to be firstly honored to review this wonderful book. I had the chance of reading a few of the chapters, so not yet the whole book. So any of the authors out there present in the room or online, I might have not been able to read your chapter yet, so I won't highlight it properly. But for me, kind of there were several takeaways. I think a lot of the things that Isabel already mentioned, Kirill already mentioned, and also Rita mentioned in terms of what the contribution of the book has been for them. If I want to pick out something that was specific for me, maybe one of the kind of the bigger highlights coming from an educational background, much like Rita's, so focusing on educational ethnography, interaction analysis, and coming to activity theory, mostly from my early readings of Vygotsky and the sociocultural tradition. I really, really enjoyed Alex Levant's introductory chapter, because it's, for me, who hasn't really yet read Ilyenkov that much, has read only Ilyenkov through kind of other people's chapters, other people's discussion of his work. Introducing activity theory or the genealogy of activity theory through Ilyenkov, by starting with Ilyenkov's ideas and then backtracking to them through Vygotsky and the kind of the genealogy of the work, was really interesting, because it gave me a whole different perspective into what counts as an activity in general. In addition, what was specifically kind of relevant or striking was in Alex's chapter was the idea that Rita also already picked up on thinking in film. And maybe kind of the thing I would kind of pick up on there and maybe drive a bit forward, maybe the idea, building on what I understood as being kind of the Ilyenkov perspective into activity, is to think in terms of the film industry, or filming as an activity. So not just individual moments kind of passing through time, but the whole activity of taking photographs, of doing film, and what kind of activity it is as part of the whole notion of human activity on the globe. in addition to Alex's chapter, what was specifically relevant for me was Boninardi's contribution and Catherine Haas's contribution, because they do engage really, I think, nicely and nicely, kind of richly, acidically as well, if I may, and very honoringly with the post-humanist approaches, which, you know, as discussed in the book, have been very kind of, you know, spreading like a good wildfire through the social sciences and the humanities, and they have challenged my thinking, my colleagues' thinking, and have been, you know, picked up a lot. And I think they their chapters were very fresh and welcomed dialogues with the post-humanist approaches and their theories, but also kind of good harsh critiques that help us hopefully to engage in further dialogue. And maybe kind of, if I may, there would be, I would like to ask from, you know, from Alex or Isabel or anybody in the audience, kind of the thing that I've been wondering kind of in relation to the connections between, especially kind of the post-humanist theorization of Gilles Deleuze and Guattari, and the connection to Ilyenkov's dialectics. What's there? What's the difference between difference and the dialectical way of thinking? And that's something that I find super curious, and I'm waiting to go back to the book and reread the chapters and try to understand if there's anything more there that we could go on with this. But a wonderful kind of book, and I'm really waiting for the summer holiday so that I can actually read all of the chapters.
Thank you so much, Jake. It's really interesting, and I think it's. I would just say to the rest of the panel, as people are going, if there are questions or points that you want to pick up in things that people have said, then we will do that shortly. So finally, but not last, but definitely not least, I will pass you over to Alan, who is, as Kyoko, head of social sciences here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the editors and the contributors for producing such a really rich volume. The breadth and the depth of the contributions is very, very impressive. My own background, I suppose, stretches back quite a while. In terms of Soviet psychology, I remember in the early 1980s buying the Riddle of the Self from Collett's bookshop in Charing Cross Road. But I can't say I'm an expert in activity theory, so I bow to all of your expertise. But I'd like, if possible, just to, for the non-expert audience, ask these experts to articulate some of the basic concepts. So could you, for example, give us some kind of an account which articulates action, activity, and practices? How are these things linked, these conceptually linked?
Yes, does anyone want to jump in with an answer to that?
Can I answer the question?
Go on, Peter. Yes.
Is that allowed?
Yes, absolutely. Go on.
So to link to that, my question, I'm Peter from the University of Westminster. My question is, you know, with AI coming a lot and jobs changing a lot of things that were done by STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, being done by AI, and a need for more. I'm just wondering about how activity theory might apply to the future of work in a more AI-assisted world, and also how it might contribute to how we teach our students and how we educate our students to make sure that things work for humanity in the way we'd like them to do better.
That's no, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. This is for those online. It's our Vice Chancellor who's here and asking very poignant and important questions. I don't know. Does anyone want to jump in with either of those? Kirill, do you have you talked about AI? Do you want to jump in on anything there, and then maybe our education people can?
Yeah, I mean, well, with the first question, I like the answer. I think it's in the Chaiklin chapter. So yeah, Leontiev does say that an activity is one thing and action is another thing and operation is another thing, but that you can kind of use different language, you can use different words to like one thing can be all three. And one thing which I like about the book as a whole is it's not necessarily going down the route of, okay, here are your concepts, go and apply them. because that itself is not very dialectical. So what it's doing is it's saying, here are tools for thinking, and these are kind of reconfigured in each of the chapters. So again, in my work, which is precisely about the role of AI in, well, specifically managing future energy grids. So I'm thinking about delivery drivers at the moment, so how they're charging their vehicles, etc. There's the assumption is that that jobs are to be replaced with AI. I really liked a post I saw. I think it was a tweet that at the moment we're in a situation where AI is replacing the things that we love, like creating poetry and making artworks, when we wanted to replace the things we hate, like doing our laundry and doing our dishes.
I've seen that.
And I think those are choices that there could. There's reasons for why it's challenging to perform more textuous tasks using AI, but it's also about the fact that when a research project around AI is created, activity theory might take a step back and say, well, okay, what are the motives of the people doing this kind of design? So I'm luckily in a design team that's very open to this sort of stuff, but a lot of computer science design teams, a lot of the design teams within companies, within Apple or something, have an idea that, well, we're replacing with AI kind of the stuff that's profitable, because then things will be even more profitable as a result. And I think a different way to look at AI, which many people are doing, is how can you assist the existing practices? So in contexts like surgery, it does mean that rather than one use which I thought was very interesting is combinations with virtual reality, where what can happen is you think you're training a human and an AI is helping you where you're doing the operation, and what the AI can do is to think about, well, if this happens and this was a real body, then this would happen. I think that's kind of one field which I'm really interested in, where you're kind of where an AI is expanding the capacities to use, expanding the freedom of people in their practices. So then the surgeon becomes a better surgeon thanks to the AI.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I was actually just thinking about some of my work looks at the way that people engage with music, and so many people have said to me, why don't you just look at Spotify, just look at people's Spotify behavior? But it's just not going to tell me what I need to know, because if I look at people's Spotify behavior, that might be them might be one of the children using their parents' account. There could be a reason that they're looking particular songs up. It doesn't actually answer the question. So it's really nice to hear this, because I think it kind of in some ways justifies the way that I'm approaching that work. In terms of education, do either of our education related panelists want to comment on what our Vice Chancellor asked? Jake, we've got you on the screen at the moment, so if you want to speak, you can.
Yeah, I can see myself through Zoom, and the lag is a bit disjointing. But I think Rita might be a bit of a better expert talking about the UK context. In the Finnish context, we've been kind of very adopting AI in higher education very early on, and even in early childhood education, which is my particular field. We've seen people using it, and there's a lot of applications of it already kind of existing in the field, or at least at the front end of the field. And I kind of welcome that change, because like Kirill said, it is, from an activity theory perspective, I think of it mostly as a tool. It's something to make the activity better with. Of course, there's always the aspect of the AI or the technology coming and biting us back and teaching us more about the technology and the way it's implemented in our activities, in our practices. But at least currently, I see it as a wonderful, the upside of using AI, for example, in higher education as a way to broader the engagement of students who struggle reading, who struggle with writing, and struggle having help with those within the kind of the modern neoliberal university context, where we're mostly pushed to kind of put fast track students in and out of the universities to get in revenue for us. So it is a way to also kind of battle back or strike back at the neoliberal system in a way. Of course, there's dangers. I see kind of like a lot of, no, not a lot of, but I do see the kind of the fear of AI coming and being used as a simple tool and not being used without any proper understanding of how the algorithms behind it work, and the way in which it might propagate our existing kind of, for example, racist tendencies or other discrepancies within our societies. But mostly, at least, from my context, I see it as a helpful tool currently.
Thank you, Jake. That's really helpful. And Rita, would you like to come in and add to that? You still there, Rita?
My question is about how activity theory might be used going forward.
Yes.
As a way of humanizing. I mean, it seems quite exciting to me. It's like AI is coming, and the opportunity for social sciences, psychology, humanities, and everything is like time is coming because a load of the stuff that. Anyway, you've got to humanize all of this stuff. And my question is, does activity theory, is it like the thing that enables that realization of that, both in the workplace and in education? And my hope is it does, because anyway, that's my question.
Can you hear that online? You could hear what was being said?
The role of activity theory. I have hope for the humanities, social sciences, psychology going forward that connect to activity. But I'm completely not an expert. But in a room full of experts.
I don't know if Rita wants to jump in, or would either of you like to comment on?
Well, in a very applied sense of our work, our approach of intervention of lecturers, enhanced use of Moodle or the technology in our case study. If we apply that approach and using activity theory-led intervention to those people who are not using technology in a way to enhance their practices, then it would give us some deeper understanding of the motives of why they're not using, or how do they want to use it. And that would be the kind of benefit or the advantage of our intervention. And how they regain agency with the technology.
And that's one thing you can do with activity theory. You can give people the theoretical tools to solve their own problems, and they will do that. So maybe you could do that in one particular context or in a particular context, to how to solve the problem, if it is a problem for education. The honest answer is, I don't know.
But we will bring out to the fore and create the working group as a collaborative problem-solving group to continuously intervene every month. That's what Miriam did with a group of people. So it does take time, but we give them the reflective tool using activity theory as an underpinning.
So there's certainly one example of where it has worked, and so in principle, this same thing could be taken to other areas.
Technological.
Technological.
Could I jump in for just 1 second? I'm not sure if you can hear.
Please do.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to just 30 seconds. I don't want to take up much time, but just to add to what's been said on this issue, because this is one of the areas of my own research of late where my own work is going. Very interested in AI from an activity theory perspective. Just to answer this question on a more maybe theoretical, from a more theoretical perspective, one of the distinguishing features of activity theory is that it understands human consciousness, human subjectivity, as others have said, not simply as a product of our incredible brains, our incredible biology, our physiology, or even as a product of our culture or language or discourse, some of the other things that we've been examining over the last several decades. In contrast to those, it focuses our attention on our activities, on our practices, as the source in its essence of our subjectivity. Not so much fine-tuning our subjectivity, which is produced by our brains, but rather understanding it in its essence as comprised of our practices. And from that perspective, thinking about AI, it's very, very interesting, because typically we often think about AI as a crude replica of the human that's kind of in process of being improved and perhaps at some point even eclipsing us. From an activity theory perspective, the intelligence of artificial intelligence no more comes from its technology than our intelligence comes from our physiology. Just like our intelligence comes from our social organization from an activity theory perspective, similarly, the intelligence of artificial intelligence comes from its ability to mimic and encode our practices in that technology. And there's a wonderful book that just came out recently by Matteo Pasquinelli called The Eye of the Master, which actually makes that very case. Coming to that argument, not through activity theory, but in another way, but essentially coming to the same realization in the world of AI. And so from an activity theory perspective, I find it incredibly helpful for demystifying some of the more, how can I put it, alarmist understandings of AI, ones that see AI as possibly in the course of becoming sentient and self-aware and misaligned with our goals in that fashion. From an activity theory perspective, those fears are really misplaced. There are reasons to fear AI, but it's not those. And it's incredibly clarifying and helpful, I think, as a methodology to help understand a whole slew of social phenomena, including technology and including artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Alex. That's really very, very clear. Thank you so much for that. How are we doing for time? We've got a little bit more time. One of the questions that I had, we've got another sort of 5 minutes before we move on to some of the readings, is the thing that sort of jumps out at me is when you work in an interdisciplinary setting, people use a lot of different language and terminology. And this is something that I've discovered when I work in an interdisciplinary setting. Do any of you find that you are having to decode what each other is saying and then find that you're actually kind of saying the same thing or thinking the same thing? Is any of you, whether it's the editors or the reviewers working in these fields, is this something that's happened? How do you manage it? How do you manage that?
Theoretical perspective from different journey, different route.
Yeah.
So we have our own baggage.
Yeah.
When you talk about activity or action, from a discursive perspective, I have a very different sense of it, and then engaging myself in an activity system way or theory way, it's slightly different. So you really need to acknowledge your intellectual baggage to absorb what resonates you and how it differs from the way you understood activity, the term itself.
Yeah, okay, even just that, yeah, that's interesting.
So that's what I experienced.
Yeah.
And it took me a while for me to actually appreciate the core, main glossary or the vocabulary, for example.
Yeah. That's interesting. Anyone else want to add to that? Whether you have found you've had to decode what people are saying or use we have a copywriter in the room. Maybe you found the same thing going on.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I think it's just very interesting that I've heard people talking from different disciplines, and sometimes I think people are using different words to actually kind of come at the same thing. So I was really just wondering the extent to which that happens and how people manage it.
Maybe if I could add very briefly, just a few words, but why I think the question is really interesting with regards to activity theory, and Kyoko already called it a system, and I think I can only speak about philosophy, but I think until recently, and the realization of actually how important the ecological crisis to actually maybe think in a more systemic way again about the planet, and also the interrelations between our own agency and how we are affected by the environment, and how this is also dialectical, maybe mutual affection and activity. And I think it's interesting that activity theory might actually provide exactly this holistic framework where people from different disciplines can think together about collective activity, but also about non-human and human coming together in a kind of shared life world, in which where different activities kind of interreact and interact. And I think the question of translation among, especially also, of course, humanities and social science, and then sciences, it might be quite interesting to bring activity theory as a kind of code to mediate between these different people.
Thank you. That's a really lovely thought, actually. Anybody else want to add to that question or that thought?
I'd like to ask Isabel a question, if possible.
Yeah, please.
So, Isabel, we know this tradition has its roots in Marxist philosophy. We know the importance of activities and practices, and we know that practices, the concepts were used in sort of conservative approaches to social theory, later Wittgenstein, Heidegger. We know they're used in these kind of Marxist approaches. I was wondering, do you think that activity theory has something intrinsically critical in its conceptual structure? Is it intrinsically a critical theory or a progressive theory, or is it neutral, which is just used as a tool in different contexts?
That's actually a really interesting question. I'm not sure I can give a very satisfying answer. Luckily, we have Alex Levant and David Backhurst also, among us, who might be able to maybe say more about especially the Soviet case. But whether it's critical or progressive, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure I can give a very good answer. But I definitely think that if it comes to also Jake's earlier question of why maybe even a more dialectical way of thinking, which is maybe even contrasted with critical thinking by lots of Western contemporary philosophy, why this might be interesting to bring this in again and speak maybe more about this development, or what you call this progression of also practice as a kind of temporalized or historicized phenomenon. I think in this regard, activity might be interesting as well. And there were multiple articles which also in the volume tried to distinguish an action or a practice or praxis from actually activity as something historical. And I thought this would be an interesting approach as well.
Thank you so much. Alex, did you want to come in on that? Go on. It's so difficult because we can't see everybody, can we? Alex, if you can hear us, did you want to add to what Isabel said?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. My apologies.
Okay.
I can add just a little bit if you like.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Maybe just I mean, I think that's what Isabel took up is a really interesting question. Maybe I'll talk more about the Soviet side of things, because that's yeah, there's a lot to say on that. I found this whole topic so interesting. When I started looking at this, I came into this work through Ilyenkov. I was looking at Soviet philosophy, and I discovered activity theory much later. And I was really quite stunned that these ideas had traveled in such interesting ways to other places and had been retooled, reconfigured, and applied in radically different for radically different purposes than they were originally intended. So they come out of the Marxist tradition in psychology, largely through Vygotsky and others. But the way they traveled across, for a whole bunch of very interesting reasons, it led to really a refoundation of these ideas on different philosophical principles. And so a lot of these ideas became re-articulated based on, say, American pragmatism, for example, really moving away from its original Marxist foundation. And although it's there, you really can't get rid of it because of the centrality of the concept of practice. That's really its hallmark. But nevertheless, the applications became far removed from really big questions that they were originally intended to solve, which really comes through in David Backhurst's work. Questions about what is the individual? How do we apply these ideas to education? Not so much how do we make an individual small business run more efficiently, for example, something that seems completely removed from anything Vygotsky or Ilyenkov or others would have been interested in. So I found that fascinating how that happened, why these ideas have real world practical value in contexts that are completely different from their original intention, right? And at the same time, how can these ideas be then perhaps used for bigger questions? Not that these aren't important, how to run organizations more effectively are important issues, but they're not the only ones, right? And we have very, very big problems on our agenda right now, some of which have been mentioned. We're really kind of at this interesting moment where our collective capacities are at their greatest, our abilities are at their height in human history, at the same time as our abilities to control these capacities are completely out of line. And so we're able to do a lot. We're not able to control those powers, right? So activity theory, I think, is uniquely positioned to deal with that unique moment in which we're in, because it's focused on our practices. Right? So anyways, I'll end there. There's a lot more to say. This is really quite fascinating, but I'm curious to hear from others who are here.
Okay, so do you want to jump in quickly?
Yeah, just quickly. Well, activity theory is progressive in that the point is to intervene and change the way that things are. And conservative philosophers like Stephen Turner don't like thinking about practices, because practices suggest the best way to change things is for us to do it together, that we're not individuals, and it's not a static tradition that's getting us to change.
Thank you. Really, really great way to finish off that section, I think, actually. So we will have some time for some Q&A at the end, but what we've got now is some readings. Yes. And, so if we want to have a refreshment for a few minutes. Yes, so we stop for five minutes. Quick break. Yeah, quick 5-minute break, and then we will hear from our authors. Think about it. Yeah, I do. Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm curious about this.
Yes.
Yeah. What was it then? And what? How to get? Yeah.
White wine? Yes.
Yeah. What's your if you want to do you're going to have to think of a way to show the learners their own data.
Yes, yeah.
There's some level of them narrating back and you can censor it.
No.
You're able to have unless what activity theory would say is you can't just stand
So
very useful. So you together, from that,
and actually we actually get basically if you're swimming, there's a combination when you hold
Thank you very much.
yeah, it's kind of the combination forces and not like yeah, I'm going to go here and check that. Yeah, I think that would be if I did have all of it, I think it's not yeah, well, and I think now I know, but actually,
I'll be doing.
like sometimes
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
Oh, it was I am interested in those.
and they say
how they saw themselves and how they saw their work environment, highly individualistic. Exactly.
Because I can consider
I still have that live and then I still use the Twitter a little bit.
but I'm sure and it was interesting because I had quite a big response.
Unfortunately,
I can't stop writing. Nice to meet you. I was watching it. So sorry, it was nice to know. Nice to go.
Thank you.
What are you gonna have? Weather, just one of those. I was in pain. So this is what they actually come with the table wine. It's not sun, it's like rain. Yeah. No, dormants.
Okay, we will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you for waiting. Yeah, thank you, David. And Annalisa, Julia.
But also there's some really good topical things.
Who else? Juliana? Juliana, are you here? There's a lot of questions. Yeah. Okay, for a long time. So everyone, please continue enjoying the refreshments, but I think we need to get back to our chat or the reading from the authors, because they are really waiting for their book, for their reading. Yes. Okay.
Is everyone online?
Yes.
One?
Well, David, yeah, Annalisa, Julio are there. I'm not sure about the others. Giuliano, I'm not sure. Yeah, Alex. Yeah, good to see you. So far, so good. Yes. Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Would you like to come up? Yeah, sure. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so we have a short reading from each of our chapter authors, and then we have an opportunity for comments and Q&As from everybody. So can we start with David Backhurst?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Are you in Canada at the moment?
No, actually, I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay. What's the time where you are?
I'm in Florida actually to watch hockey because it's the Stanley Cup final coming up, and my son works for the Florida Panthers, who are in the final. So he's invited me down here to see some games. So the time is 11:25. So I see glasses of wine in people's hands, but it's a little bit early for that over here. But so thank you very much, I should say, to Alex, Kyoko, and Miriam for inviting me to participate in the project and also in this wonderful event. It's been a pleasure listening to the discussion. I'm a philosopher, as you know, and I've written a fair amount about a philosopher's name has been mentioned many times at this event, and that's Evald Ilyenkov, who's recognized as an important influence on the Soviet tradition of activity theory. And my contribution to the book is in an interview which Alex and I put together. So because it's an interview, it discusses a range of different sorts of topics. So it was difficult to choose what to focus on for this little reading, but I thought I'd say something about Ilyenkov's involvement in the work of a specialist in special education, Alexander Mishirakov, who worked with children who are both blind and deaf. And so I thought I'd read a little bit about that topic. So Alex and I get onto that topic in the interview because I'm talking about the role of the relation of thought and activity. And I say, in this context, it's helpful to think about the reality of child development. Philosophers tend to be preoccupied with vision. And as an aside, I should say that if you read any epistemologists talking about perception, they're almost always focused on vision. And as a result of that, it's tempting for philosophers to portray concepts as akin to visual representations, to see thought as a play of images or a string of words in the mind's eye, and to portray reflection as contemplation. It's true that young children in search of knowledge want to see, but they also want to hear, to smell and touch, especially touch. It's easy to underestimate the role of bodily activity in the origin, development, and refinement of our mental powers if we're entirely focused on the visual. This prompts Alex then to ask me to say something about Ilyenkov's involvement in Misherakov's work in the education of blind deaf children. So I go on to say this. Alexander Misherakov was a specialist in the education of blind deaf students. And in the 1960s, he was working at the Zagorsk home for children with severe sensory impairments. He had remarkable success with 4 students who graduated from high school and then in the 1970s went on to do degrees at Moscow University. Ilyenkov first met Misherakov in 1967, I think, and his first reference to Misherakov's work is in a lecture given in January 1968. At that time, Ilyenkov hadn't yet met Misherakov's 4 proteges. That happened a few months later. But thereafter, he was much involved with Misherakov's work, and he befriended and mentored the 4 students, especially Alexander Suvorov, with whom he became very close. Ilyenkov thought Misherakov's experiment, as it came to be known, was of great philosophical and psychological significance. There is an interesting short paper co-written by Ilyenkov and Misherakov, published only recently, in which they explain why the work is so important. They argue that because blind deaf children are profoundly isolated by their sensory impairments, isolated from the world, and especially isolated from other people, they simply do not develop psychologically. Accordingly, the pedagogue has to deliberately create the conditions in which their mental powers can be activated and cultivated. So the experience of working with blind deaf children can teach us a lot about the preconditions of human psychological development in general. Central among them, it transpires, is the child's initiation into the basic activities of everyday life, learning to eat with a spoon, learning to dress oneself, and so on. Ilyenkov sees this process of initial humanization, as they called it, sounds a bit better in Russian, not just a matter of training in basic routine behaviors, but as the child's entrance into the realm of the ideal or into the realm of meaning. Learning to relate to the world as a site of significance and value, and building communicative relations to other human beings so that the child's environment comes to life as a meaningful world and their activity within it is constantly mediated by ideal phenomena, including the activity of other-minded beings. Of course, the situation of the blind deaf child helps us orientate ourselves away from the usual emphasis on highly visual modes of experience and thought, and to appreciate the importance of embodied engagement with reality through touch. Ilyenkov was convinced that there was so much to learn from all this, but of course his attitude to the project was not one of a detached scholar. He was deeply moved by Misherakov's work, which he thought exemplified the egalitarian commitment to create social conditions in which all citizens can flourish, whatever disabilities they may have, a commitment that he thought central to the communist ideal. And he also became very attached to Misherakov's students themselves.
Thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, David. Shall we round of applause to David? Yes. We actually can, and people online not so easily. Okay, shall we move now to Uriel Engström, have I pronounced that right?
Yeah,
Uriel Engström.
Don't worry about the pronunciation.
I'm getting there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's like David said, it is not easy to pick a small segment to read, and I'm also in the predicament, but from a different perspective, because my chapter in the book, first of all, it's a co-authored chapter, so absolutely it means that I have to kind of borrow also from my co-authors without being able to fully give them recognition, because the co-authored papers are like they are. And the other thing is that it's a chapter based on 2 case studies, which are fairly detailed, even technical to some extent. And this are 2 studies of learning in social movements. And so the activities that are in focus here are 2 social movements. One of them is called La Paz, and it's the Spanish social movement that emerged in the face of the real estate crisis in Spain, and built a kind of a very powerful resistance against evictions of people who could not anymore afford to pay their rents or pay their mortgages. And it became a movement that actually created a serious counterforce, for instance, to banks, which were foreclosing or you know, launching the evictions. And this movement also was very important in helping individual people and families who were losing their homes to reorganize their lives practically. So in that sense, I like to talk about these movements as productive social movements, because they are not only against something, but they're actually building new ways of living and new kinds of livelihood. The other case is actually a cooperative in Finland, based on new ways of producing food. It's a food cooperative in a part of Helsinki, which has now endured quite a long time, shown its durability. People there have organized their own farm outside the city, and in which they together hire a skilled farmer and also do volunteer work their own, and gradually it has become a sort of significant, at least for those participants, a significant alternative, or at least a sort of a let's say potential alternative to industrially produced food, which is available in the supermarkets. Now, both of these social movements are important in the sense that they touch on the basic needs of human beings. One, food; the other one, dwelling, housing. And we in a research project, we followed these 2 social movements for quite a lengthy period, trying to understand in which ways they cope with various kinds of challenges, difficulties, which ways they learn to continue, survive, and overcome obstacles. And the framework to try to analyze it was the theory of expansive learning, which is an activity theoretical approach to try to understand learning not only as reproduction, but also as generation of new forms of activity. In the conclusion part of this chapter, I write a few sentences which I would like to read. In both La Paz and in the Herttoniemen food cooperative, the durability of the expansive learning process was founded on continuous re-experiencing of contradictions. both as systemic forces and as personal or collective conflicts or motives. This push factor was organically connected to the pull of actionable and implementable models for the future of the activity. In the case of La Paz, the Spanish movement, the person we focus on in the analysis called Mireia, her new activity of mutual aid, and in the Herttoniemi food cooperative case, the board members' model of degrowth, which they developed, combined, they were both what we might call enacted utopias, to borrow from Annalisa Sannino's work, in the sense that they were very much everyday actions grounded in their everyday experiences, but at the same time created an entirely new perspective of possibilities that gave them a long-term meaning and significance for the activity. So I'm writing models of new activity may be seen as a way to anchor the expansive learning upward. In both La Paz and the Herttoniemi cooperative, the process also needed to be anchored downward in practical embodied actions and artifacts. So this anchoring both up and down, and at the same time the push and pull factors, which I use liberally, borrowing from organization studies in which these kinds of notions have been often used, I think help us understand that learning in these types of activities is actually foundational precondition for the existence of the activity. The activity itself, you could say, is continuous struggle with obstacles and crises, but at the same time creating something which may become truly an enacted utopia.
Thank
I'm
you.
done.
Many thanks for that. Always searching for utopia myself, so that's good. Can I now hand over to Annalisa?
Yes, thank you so much.
Also,
first of all, yeah, can you hear me?
we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I wish to thank the editors for all their work on this volume, and also all the colleagues involved in this event. I enjoyed very much both reading the book and learning from the exchanges in this event. This chapter of mine is an invitation to dialectics. And more specifically, it is an invitation to its rationale of contradiction, as opposed to what is the formal logic predominant rationale of non-contradiction. And the chapter claims that the dialectical rationale of contradiction is essential to gain a thicker description of agency that does not disconnect agency from development and can help open up perspectives essential for the future of our planet, which are perspectives of learning expansively and transformative agency. So for my reading today, I selected the ending parts of this chapter from page 323. So I start reading. Instead of bypassing the concrete processes through which individuals and collectives struggle with structures, prescriptions, and procedures, the chat Cultural Historical Activity Theory Rationale of Contradiction invites us to dig into what people actually do. This may lead us to notice local experimentations and innovations that may be disregarded under abstract categories that do not allow to account for them. The chapter encourages educational researchers to turn to the chat dialectical rationale of contradiction presented in the fourth section of the chapter to explore how the lived drama of agency in today's capitalism translates into everyday instances of enacted transformative agency, and how their research can contribute to support this type of agency. The traps of abstract categorizations lie with the central tenet of the classical logic rationale of non-contradiction, according to which two terms cannot contradict one another at the same time and under the same relation. This is the dominant way of thinking taught for centuries in schools, which prioritize immobile identity, constant permanence, and perennial validity. In everyday creative endeavors, as in the development of popular culture, instead of abstract, ready-made conceptual tools, historically formed categories are in use, which emerge from practical and theoretical experimentation. In the central dialectical principle of ascending from the abstract to the concrete, often referred to in cultural historical activity theory scholarship, these historically formed categories are concrete in that they embody lived contradictory features which disclose unity in their movement of becoming and in their interconnectedness. As in Hegel's examples that is in the chapter, one can see that the features of a criminal in the person brought to an execution may coexist with the features of a victim if the inquiry opens up to the process and relation which led to the criminal actions. The core point in this chapter is that the adoption of the chat rationale of contradiction lends itself to studies of agency which can renew this field of inquiry in education. The chat rationale of contradiction supports perspectives according to which nothing is permanent, and even what appears to be strong instances of lack of agency may be revealed to carry features of their opposite and may one day turn in strong manifestations of agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating, and it was good to hear a bit about your chapter in the review as well. So maybe we can just about got time for sort of one more reading. So if we can now go to Giuliano Camillo.
I saw him earlier. Yes.
Giuliano?
Yeah.
Let me just see if there's a, doesn't look like his name.
Yeah, I did see him when at 3 o'clock. Yeah, when we started.
Just checking. No.
In the meantime, yeah, any questions or any clarifications?
Yeah, I think we're sort of getting to the end of our time. So if there is anybody that oh, hang on, something just came up in the chat.
Yeah, Giuliano said that he has some connection problem with the home internet. Yeah, he's in Brazil.
Okay, Alex says he's gone.
A very strong connection at all.
Okay, so maybe we finished the readings there. Yes,
yeah,
but that's been a really lovely insight into the book. We have to stop fairly soon.
Yes.
Do you want to see whether there are any burning questions? Talia has a question. Yes.
I love the presentation and thank you so much. Actually, I felt more closer to two of the chapters than two of the authors, like Professor Annalisa Sanino, who mentioned contradiction, because I'm working on contradictions and in a methodology in qualitative research. So I will look forward to reading and then to contacting her, and also to Professor Eggenstrom, because he's
You're Engström.
yes,
Yeah, Professor Engström.
on movements, and I have actually a question that might be linked to what Peter said before regarding ethical dimension. So we can have activities that are very successful. It could be activities such as a movement that tries to defend people who are evicted from homes, but we could also have an activity of, for example, in the Holocaust, it was a very successful activity of killing other people in a very scientific way and with a very good organizational skills. So does activity theory become a tool for any potential group? Because it could be a group that wants to perform a kind of societal activity of extinction or ethnic cleansing and to do it very successfully. That's my question.
I've never thought about that, but that's a very interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, there's Yurio's got his hand up. Yurio, would you like to respond to that?
Well, actually, I think that I wanted to connect back to an earlier question about whether activity theory is inherently a critical or a change-oriented or a progressive theory or not. And I think that if you take seriously the dialectical legacy and the logic of contradictions, it is first of all it is an approach that requires you to dig into the history of the given activity that you want to understand, and to understand it in movement through contradictions. And this means that you cannot take for granted that it is either a good activity or bad activity. That you have to dig into it and see it in its contradictoriness and make choices, take sides. It's a theory that invites you to take your own standpoint and if necessary to fight for it. I don't think that any theory such as activity theory would give you a full prescription of how the world should be, and it would be an absurd idea. But as a building on dialectical logic, it demands from you a very different type of let's say commitment to whatever activity you might be committed. Your commitment must be based on grasping this activity in its historical emergence and its inherent contradictions, which are not, the resolution of those contradictions is in no way predetermined. It is something where you, as a participant or as an observer or as a researcher, are obliged to take a stand.
Thank you very much. Does that give you a good answer, Talia?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So timing wise, Kyoko, I think we're sort of heading over to you doing some closing remarks.
Oh, okay. I forgot about it.
Do you want to come here so that people could,
any other questions or clarifications or any impressions or any positive feedback? Well, thank you very much for coming today, and I'm very delighted that we had this very interesting dialogue, and thank you for the participation remotely, those authors and the reviewers for provoking us further thoughts to the product that we have just thought finished, but in fact it's already in motion, which is I'm very excited. So our journey continues, And
Volume 2 then.
yes, whatever. Well, maybe it's the next segment will be more different kind of formulations. But I'm very delighted that we had this conversation, and we will have actually in a sociocultural theory conference called ISCA in Rotterdam in August. We have a longer version of this book launch that each authors will speak, and we have discussant. So we have some more thinking time to produce an interesting account. But by all means, do continue our dialogue, and I hope that this gives you a sense of who I am in a way and what kind of people I hang around. And I'm very delighted that these authors are kind of coming to this space. And thank you very much, despite the time difference and all your commitment. Yeah. And I also want to thank Catherine, because you came on board as a kind of a person outside of this field, but you really run this event brilliantly, and I want to thank you for this.
Thank you very much. And I've seen lots of interaction in the chat,
Yeah.
so I know that people have been chatting to
great.
each other there as well, which is really nice, and sharing readings, and I'm sort of slightly envious that I've seen these links going up, so you'll have to capture them all.
Yes, it will be it's recorded.
Brilliant.
So if you want to go back to it and kind of digest even further, this should be available. But I want to thank Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kyoko. Very, very impressive project, and just such an amazing group of people that we've heard from. I feel really quite humbled by the extraordinary brains we've had, and really sort of very just fascinating concepts. It's really, really made me think. So I'm sure that's true for everybody else in the room. So thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of you online. I think I can see, I'm looking at this screen here, but actually we probably need to be looking over there and saying thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you, and have a good afternoon.